ते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये श्रीमतां स्वगता कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तना हृदयान्तोऽस्तु भद्राणि विदुनोति सहितं नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Hare Krishna. So today we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, verses 47 and 48. Tasmat karmasu bharhisman ajnanadartakashishu marta drishtim krita stotra sparsiv aprishtovastushu. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. My dear Marisman, you should never out of ignorance take to the Vedic rituals or to fruitive activity, which may be pleasing to hear about or which may appear to be the goal of self-interest. You should never take these to be the ultimate goal of life. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 2.42 to 43 it is said, Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadnanti avipaschitaha Vedavadarata partha nanyadastiti vadinaha kamanmana svargapara janma karma phala pradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishvarya gatim prati. Men of small knowledge are very much attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. Generally, people are very much attracted to the fruitive activities sanctioned in the Vedic rituals. One may be very much attracted to becoming elevated to heavenly planets by performing great sacrifices, like those of King Bharishman. Sri Narad Muni wanted to stop King Bharishman from engaging in such fruitive activities. Therefore, he is now directly telling him, don't be interested in such temporary benefits. In modern civilization, people are very much interested in exploiting the resources of material nature through the methods of science. Instead, this is considered advancement. This is not actually advancement, however, but is simply pleasing to hear. Although we are advancing according to such concocted methods, we are forgetting our real purpose. Bhaktivinoda Thakur therefore says, Chala vidya yuta mayara vaibhava tomara bhajane bhada. Materialistic studies are the glare of Maya only, for they are an obstacle to spiritual progress. The temporary comforts of life, experienced either on this planet or on other planets, are all to be taken as illusory, because they do not touch the real purpose of life. The real purpose of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. Ignorant of the real purpose of life, people take to either gross materialistic activities or ritualistic activities. King Bharashman is herein requested not to be attached to such activities. In the Vedas it is stated that the performance of sacrifice is the actual purpose of life. A section of the Indian population known as the Arya Samajis laid too much stress on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas. This verse indicates, however, that such sacrifices are to be taken as illusory. Actually, the aim of human life should be God realization or Krishna consciousness. The Vedic performances are, of course, very glittering and pleasing to hear about, but they do not serve the real purpose of life. Text 48. Samlokam na vidusteve yatra devo janardanaha ahurdhumra dhiyo vedam sakarmakam atadvida. Translation and purport. Those who are less intelligent accept the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies all in all. They do not know that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand one's own home, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives. Not being interested in their real home, they are illusioned and search after other homes. Generally, people are not aware of their interest in life to return home back to Godhead. People do not know about their real name in the spiritual world, their real home in their spiritual world. The spiritual world, there are many Vaikuntha planets, and the topmost planet is Krishna Loka, Golok Vrindavan. Despite the so-called advancement of civilization, there is no information of the Vaikuntha Lokas, the spiritual planets. At the present moment, so-called advanced civilized men are trying to go to other planets, but they do not know that even if they go to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, they have to come back again to this planet. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8.16. Abrahma bhuvanaloka punaravartinorjuna mamapetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. One goes to the highest planetary system within this universe, he still has to return after the effects of pious activities are finished. Space vehicles may go very high in the sky, but as soon as their fuel is finished, they have to return to this earthly planet. All these activities are performed in illusion. The real attempt should now be to return home back to Godhead. The process is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Yanti madhyajino bhimam. Those who engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead return home back to Godhead. Human life is very valuable, and one should not waste it in the vain exploration of other planets. One should be intelligent enough to return to Godhead. One should be interested in information about the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and in particular the planet known as Golok Vrindavan. And one should earn the art of going there by the simple method of devotional service, beginning with hearing. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.3.51. कलर्दोषानिधे राजन् अस्ति हे को महान् गुणा कीर्तनादेव कृष्णस्य मुक्तसङ्गा परं रजे. One can go to the supreme planet Param Raje simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. This is especially meant for the people of this age, Kalir Dosha Nidhe. It is a special advantage of this age that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can become purified of all material contamination and return home back to Godhead. There is no doubt about this. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastyate Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shri Sadguru Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, everyone. I'd like to seek the blessings of all the assembled senior Vaishnavas here, so that I can do my best in presenting uh, whatever knowledge has been provided by the acharyas, and uh, and so that this could be a purification process for me. So that being said, I'll get started. So, since we've now heard the verses and purports, uh, we can reflect on what Narad Muni is really teaching King Barishman, and through that, what we're being taught. So, in these verses, Narad Muni is speaking directly to the king. So, to give context, and I'm sure, like how others have done the past few days, the king was performing these massive, elaborate Vedic rituals. And these sacrifices are meant to bring, all sorts of heavenly pleasures and prosperity, prestige, and good karma. So they and these rituals, they require lots of resources and manpower and commitment. So Narad Muni waits for the perfect moment, and he essentially is telling the king to not mistake these rituals as the ultimate purpose of life. And that's a pretty powerful statement because, you know, to most people, these rituals will look like completely spiritual, right? And like they're sanctioned in the Vedas and they bring benefits that people admire. So even though it seems this way, Narad Muni still says that this is not the goal. So the Bhagavad Gita verses which are quoted in the purport explain this further. Krishna is warning Arjuna about people who get caught up in all this flowery language. Like when people hear about the descriptions of the heavenly planets or good birth, enjoyment, fame, and power, all of these things feel attractive, they feel religious, and they feel like progress. And one example is with Abrahamic religion, right? So the one promise that you have for following God is, going to heaven. And they say that, you'll have the biggest riches and like eternal bliss. So, th this is all these are all kind of rewards, right? So Krishna calls the people who chase these rewards men of small knowledge. And that's not because they're unintelligent in a worldly sense, but it's because they actually don't grasp the deeper spiritual purpose of life. So Narad Muni is telling the king and he's telling us to not confuse all these side benefits of religion with the actual purpose of the soul. So religion isn't for, just getting a nicer life, like either here or in heaven, right? Religion is actually for getting out of illusion altogether, to actually find out our true eternal position, right? Which is beyond all sorts of worldly desires. So this purport also connects, to our modern world. Like today, people usually don't perform all these huge sacrifices. Maybe they do on a small scale, but instead, many people are sacrificing their time, their energy, their intelligence, and their entire focus towards exploiting material nature through science and technology, right? And, this doesn't mean that technology is bad or science is bad. They're wonderful tools, but when we treat them like the ultimate path to happiness, and when we think advancement means more control, more consumption, more comfort, then we're falling into the same trap that the king was falling into. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur called this Jada Vidya, which means material knowledge that dazzles us like the glare of Maya. So it looks bright, but it actually blinds us from seeing the goal of life. For example, a scientist for decades and decades, um, they can try to prove certain theories, but there are many theories that can't even be proved within, a lifetime of a scientist. For example, the theory of evolution, since Darwin's time until now, it's still only a theory. And there's many other such things. So, these can all, when someone overexerts themselves in, you know, in sacrifice their time and energy by exploiting material nature in this way, that can actually blind them from seeing the goal of life. So just because you can have all the best comforts in the world, like, does it really matter, right? Because if you still have to take birth again, still reset, grow old again, get sick again, and die again, then, you've not really solved anything. So Narad Muni reminds the king that even if you go to the higher planets, even if you reach Brahmaloka, right, you can still come back. So Krishna says in the Gita, from the highest planet down to the lowest, all are places of misery. So on Earth, we think we're suffering, and we assume like if I just go somewhere better, everything else will be fine. But even in the higher planets where the lifespans are huge and the pleasures are refined and the suffering is practically absent, even there time catches up and karma runs out and the soul will fall back down. The soul can fall back down. So what Narada Muni is teaching is simply to not waste our human life on, all these temporary upgrades. So human life isn't actually meant for exploring other planets, whether through Vedic sacrifices or other means. Human life is meant for going beyond all these planets, for going beyond just the body. So that brings us to speaking about the real home, which is Vaikuntha, Goloka. So Narad Muni says that the whole purpose of the Vedas is to help us find our way back home, right? So now, there's a difference when you use the word home, whether uh, and just saying going back to some other planet, right? So home is the place where someone belongs. It's where they're originally from. So home means the spiritual world. So this is Golok Vrindavan, where Krishna himself resides. So in this world, people they don't take birth, they don't die, they don't age, they don't become sick, they don't work for survival, they don't work for their own ego. Instead, they exist eternally in the loving transcendental service of Krishna. So, um, and another thing is, uh, instead of being interested, in this home, we try to build our attachments here, right? To houses, money, comforts, and relationships, thinking that they will all satisfy us, right? But in those scenarios we'll be looking for the home in all the wrong places, right? It's like building up a straw house that can be blown away any moment because these are all temporary things. So the Gita gives us the solution, right? Those who serve me with devotion come to me, is what Krishna says. And in the Bhagavatam, it said that simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one can reach the supreme destination. So this is so like merciful for us living in Kali Yuga, right? We don't need any complex rituals. We don't need massive resources. We don't need perfect purity or deep scholarship. All we need is sincerity, willingness, and we need to engage in the process of devotional service, which starts with hearing and chanting. So this is why the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is emphasized so much. It's not just sound, it's not just some tradition, right? It's the direct line of connection to the spiritual world. That's what Srila Prabhupada mentions. So, so there's some key points that we can learn from Narad Muni guidance. The first is to not mistake religious rituals or material achievements as the purpose of life, right? They may be pleasing, respectable, even helpful if you do them for the right purpose, but in the end, they are temporary. Second, the real goal is to go back home, back to Godhead, because that's our eternal destination. And third, modern materialism is just a new form of the same old distraction, right? Like all the new technology and everything, however new it may be, it still won't satisfy the soul. And fourth, devotional service, especially hearing and chanting, is the path, right? Uh, Everything else, is not actually meant for this age. And so the last thing we should understand is that this human life and this birth that we've taken is actually extremely rare and precious, right? A lot of times it might be easy for us to forget that because we see, how many people around us. There's countless and countless, there's like 8 billion people on this earth. But even then, we have like many times we don't think about the fact that the other species that are here present with us are, millions of times more. And, they don't have the intelligence to actually take up the spiritual path. So we have to see this human life as a real blessing and not waste it. So Narad Muni wasn't discouraging the king to just criticize him. He was actually giving him the gift and the opportunity to not waste his life. And that same opportunity is being offered to all of us. So if we spend a few minutes a day chanting, like all the wonderful devotees here are doing, and read a little bit from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, and serve spiritual master, and remember that spiritual life is at the center, and have everything else kind of support that, then we can, keep making those small shifts towards a completely Krishna conscious life, and our life can move in a meaningful direction. So yeah, that's all I have to share for today. Thank you for